We're talking about telemarketers, the NFL Week 1 coverage, and 9/11 documentaries. And now your host. He's a little bit late, but he's always here. It's Mike Indeglio.
What's up, team? Welcome to K&M Geekly. Just a sneak peek at two geeks, letting you know some of the stuff that got them through their week, and starting this week off strong by being late. We're going to talk a little bit about that later in the show, believe it or not. But I am here. It is Monday. It is September 11th. Keith and I would like to start the show with just a quick respect and our I don't even know, commemoration. I was going to say love and prayers and all of the stuff. Just general
acknowledgement, maybe?
general feels, and celebration of the heroism that we saw that on that day, and just all of the positive feelings and respect and reverence to those who lost their lives to silliness and evil. So
yeah, and it is one of those things. I texted you last night. We were talking about it. It's crazy now that it has been longer, at least in terms of my life, right? Mm-hmm. It is now more than half of my life after 9/11 than before, which is staggering to think about.
Yeah, well, 2001, my father passed away, 9/11, and then I moved to New York City. So it was like there's a stamp in the ground for many people, but this is our podcast, of life before then and life after then. It's very distinct.
Yeah, well, I mean, for us, because it's, roughly halfway through our lives, but also, right in that era when we both moved to the city. Mm-hmm. So we literally both
we've
went
done long term on that day in 9/11 before, so I don't think that's what we're going to do today. But also, it's not. I don't really want to. That's not really what I want to talk about. So we're going to talk about some other stuff, and then I'm going to point out some documentaries and things you might want to check out. First thing I want to highly recommend: if you've never been to the 9/11 Memorial in New York City, if you go to New York, a lot of people actually, when all the museums and fun, great tourist stuff you can do in New York City, they actually built maybe one of the best, if not the best, museum in New York City is the 9/11 Memorial. It's way down in Battery Park. There are two really portions to it. There's the physical memorial, which is the reflection pools, as they're called, which is basically in the footprints of the two towers that came down. They built these really beautiful reverse fountains, so it's water flowing over the edge into the footprints with all of the names of the victims. And it's a little park, and it gives you the vibe. First things first, it's beautiful and reflective. But there are a lot of people there who it's just one of those collective shared grief things. Mm. And then you move into the actual museum, which you need a ticket for. I don't know if it's ticketed, paid for, how they work it anymore. For many years, it was a donation-based situation, but it might have changed by now. And in New York, a lot of museums are free on Sundays, so you can check it out. I don't have any details on that, but it is an absolutely mammoth museum that feels both epic in scale and also very intimate and beautiful. And it's down in the Battery, which is also where the Holocaust Museum is, and some other really kind of reflective museums. And listen, Jen and I talked about this last night. It's hard to watch and to re-experience a lot of those feelings, or to even butt up against them. I understand that, but that doesn't mean that it's not a worthwhile exercise for yourself and for those who want to be remembered and people who need us to remember it, to acknowledge that. And I'll talk more about that with some of the things I've been watching. So anyway, I highly recommend that museum and whatnot. So
I haven't been to Ground Zero since it was Ground Zero.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think that both logistically, it's not just a place we go very often, just in our line of work and stuff. Yeah. And also, I think there are probably some emotional checks and balances that are latent that live down there.
And I think, I was not in the city when it happened. I was in New York, but not in the city. But obviously we both moved there quickly after. I think I had like emotional blocks about it all for years, where I just sort of like, wow, I saw that, I acknowledged that that's terrible, but didn't really feel it. And I feel like I feel it more now than I did then, because I'm just more available to it, which is why I have a hard time going to the museum and watching the documentaries and all that kind of stuff today.
Yeah, I had moved there just after, and so it was funny, I was on my way to New York that day, and my train on the New Jersey Transit that you take all the time just stopped, and we stood there looking out the window at smoke in the sky, and literally it wasn't like cell phone days where you just like Googled it.
Right.
Anyway, not the point, but it was so fresh afterwards, and for the years I was in school, the first couple of years I was there, is that I made often, probably to the detriment of my health, pilgrimages downtown. And, it's just a smell that you'll never be able to describe, like rubber, chemicals, fire, and death, basically all wrapped into a smell. And so I went down there very often. And so, and there was a feeling in the city. And if you were even remotely tangentially connected to New York or had moved there or made it your home at that point, whether you were there on the day or not, sort of it was inconsequential. It was about being part of something, which really ingratiated me to the city early.
We should move on.
Yeah,
because we have talked about this long form. If you're curious, there's we talk about on the Out of Practice podcast, where I don't remember which episode it is, but it's whenever the practice aired the most recent episode to 9/11, because we do sort of a time capsule there. But yeah, because I moved almost to the day exactly 1 year after.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
and just like riding the subway on the first anniversary was just like, whoa.
Yeah, I moved on. My school began on October 1st. And so I must have moved the last week of September. Can you imagine I guess my mom at that point being like, okay, bye.
I can imagine her doing that, yes.
Yeah, as a matter of fact. So anyway, I guess let me start there then. So if you want to spend some time, interestingly, usually it was for years after the fact, maybe a decade on, every year it was like, who can get out the newest 9/11 documentary, right? Is it History Channel?
Footage,
is it
who's
this
got
or that?
whatever?
And the last new one I had seen, which kind of made me realize it was sort of over. The one portion was over. Was TMZ released a video recently, or a full documentary recently called "The Fifth Plane" or something like that, and I was like, okay, I guess
TMZ,
it's over. But what I watched last night as sort of my yearly pilgrimage of being in it was two things that you can easily seek out, and I highly recommend. I'm just going to list them and leave it. First, brand new, it aired last night after football, is 60 Minutes. Did a 45-minute sort of their piece on the FDNY. They did 20 minutes, 30 minutes on some of the events of that day, some of the heroism of some of the chiefs, some of the heroism, all of the heroism of some of the firefighters who made decisions when they went up, came down, the first tower fell, and then decided, I'm still going to go into the second tower and go try to save people. Think about that. Just like as a human being, contemplate in your life the hardest decision you've ever had to make. And then ask yourself, if you were tasked to die, would you make those decisions? I'd like to think I would, but I don't know. Okay. And then what I thought was really beautiful was, one quote I'll mention from one of the chiefs who said, I forget, the interviewer asked him point blank, it was a really well done interview. He said, that day on your command, you had to tell hundreds of firefighters to go potentially to their death. How many said no or asked for a different assignment? And even though you knew what answer was coming, it's still impactful here. And he said, no one denied their orders. And then they spend the second part, which is really, really gets me choked up in thinking about it, was they did a whole piece, a whole story on, and this is how old we are now, Keith, kids who were toddlers when their parents died in the fires, who then have now spent their lives becoming firefighters in New York and protecting people in New York to take on the legacy of their parents. And some of them in this very same firehouses their dads worked, who walk into work every day and see memorials of their father on the wall. That's it's 60 Minutes. It aired last night. You can catch it on your DVR, or I'm pretty positive it's on YouTube at this point. So that's one. And then the other one, which I find to be the definitive 9/11 documentary currently existing. I think it's currently on, you can find it on Netflix, Hulu, and Disney Plus. is called 9/11 One Day in America. And it uses documentary footage of these two brothers who were shooting documentary of that day, as well as a ton of first-person, like they just compiled all of the cell phone video, this video, that video, compile it all together into a timeline. It is both a documentary and also sort of a living document of the experience.
Yeah, it was stunning. Yeah, I remember.
It is
I saw it.
An achievement in filmmaking. So that is 9/11 One Day in America. So those are my two recommends for the year. Keith, let's bounce to your first thing.
And I will quickly say, speaking up for those of us who will not be watching any of that, because
totally awesome, fine too.
I don't need any help remembering, and I don't want to dramatize myself. But I'm glad that it's available, and I'm glad that I have seen it. But I totally get it. I'll make a different type of pilgrimage, which I'm sure many people will.
Yeah, totally get it. Okay, so that brings us to, I believe we were going to talk about
this. So,
nope, just kidding. Topic 2.
Okay, that was things are happening. Topic 2, yes. So I just wanted to, and I understand that this audience is probably not overlapping as much with our football fandom as our other fandoms, but I'll try to talk about it in the nerdiest possible way. This was week 1 of the NFL season, which to me is my personal Christmas. The first opening day of football, where all things have hope and joy, and we get all of our football back after the long winter without it. As a Giants fan, the Christmas ended early, but I want to talk a little bit about what's going on from a technical side, broadcasting, which is what I care about, and give you a little tip on how, if you don't want to shell out $400 for NFL sign-in ticket, I got a way you can do it cheaper. So without going on sketchy websites. So first off, couple of improvements in the broadcasting this year. Both CBS and NBC have gone to a full 1080p, which is great because we've been suffering with 720p or 1080i, which is very pixel bus watching football. They've been at 60 frames for a while now, which has been great. I think makes more of a difference than anything else being at 60 frames per second. It's 30 frames per second because you don't have the stutter ball. But you know, NBC's doing some version of an HDR going on as well on Peacock, at least.
It's terrible.
So the image looks better than it has yet.
That is true. Yeah.
Fox still struggle busing at 720. It's at 60, which is fine, but they're still giving us a 720 feed. And I understand that the, you know, bumping it up to 4K causes a lot of technical and price logistical issues, but I feel like Fox, you can get us to 1080 now, at least. Come on.
Well, they do college football. They do college football in an upscaled 1080p. Well, it's still upscaled. There is no pure 4K feeds coming, but
that's fine.
Same difference.
I mean, it doesn't. I mean, honestly, with my old eyes, a good 1080p is all I need. Like 4K doesn't make HDR is a little dark for me, a little dull. I want my just like good 1080p with all the colors, you know, up like a candy store. Anyway, so I was happy to see those changes. Obviously, there's always little broadcast changes to, you know, people coming in and out of the studio. Looks like J.J. Watt is now on the CBS pregame show, which is great. But that has my buddy Phil Simms on it, so that's all I care about. And I believe this is the 30th anniversary of the Fox getting the broadcast, which started in 1994, which I remember distinctly as a child. Because my New York Football Giants games were, of course, always on CBS, who had the NFC package, then lost it. Fox took it over. Okay, fine, sure, whatever. Except for, at that point in Vermont, there was no Fox affiliate. Period. There was no Fox affiliate over the air. So our local CBS station purchased the Fox NFL coverage and showed it on CBS. Great. No problem, right? All right, so they're going to show the Giants games that way, except for the only exception in their contract was CBS is like, all right, fine, whatever. We don't have a lot going on Sunday afternoons, but 60 Minutes starts at 7. I don't care if the game is still going on. It's the most exciting game in the fourth quarter of the football game. 60 Minutes starts at 7. So several of my New York Football Giants games were cut off right in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter. Drove me bananas. Anyway, Fox has done, other than their 720p, have been doing excellent coverage. Now, that's not interesting. You want to know what's interesting? All right, so behind me, I have 5 televisions, and they are set up so that I can watch 5 simultaneous football games every Sunday. And the way I do that is not paying for the NFL Sunday ticket package, because that's too much money. What you can do is by using a VPN router, a virtual private network, which what that does is it makes your computer look like it's in a different location based on the router set up by your VPN company. And I use ExpressVPN, which I find to be excellent. It has a lot of locations. Their customer service is terrific.
I use CyberGhost, so there are tons, and they're always having deals. So
they're always having deals. Like it's not super cheap, right? But what you get for it is I can chat with them 24/7.
I think I paid $60 for the year, man. It can be cheap.
Yeah, I think I pay like 115 or whatever. But what you also need is a VPN router, which are not crazy expensive. They're like $120 or whatever. You can get so that your router you launch your VPN software onto the router, which then gives you access to a dashboard where I can set up to I think 7 different locations all around the world, and then assign each of I use Roku devices, right? So I've got 5 or 6 different little Roku boxes, and I can individually assign each of these Roku boxes a location across America. And that allows me to be in whatever city of the game that I want to watch. Now, this does not work with YouTube TV, because the YouTube TV does not allow you to watch it via UPN. That's also true of Hulu and many of the other streamers. However, and look, they may shut this down at some point, so this will only exist for now. The Fox Sports and Paramount Plus, which gives you Fox and CBS, which are the 2, broadcasting ones that aren't doing national games, those apps are fooled by the VPN. So if I want to watch the Bears game in Chicago, I put that location, that Roku box in Chicago, then open up the Fox Sports application, which if you have a TV package, you pay for cable, right? You just log in and it shows you the local NFL game there. Same with Paramount Plus. You watch the local CBS in whatever city you're in. And as a result, yes, there is an expense, ahead of time, right? You have to buy the router, and you have to pay for the VPN service at whatever it costs. But then that's just, that's it. Pales in comparison to what the NFL Sunday package is, and allows me to have my own sports bar here in my lonely basement.
So I have some comments. I'm just to offer another side of the coin. That's all fascinating, and me personally, totally into it. I do it a different way. But same told. But at the end of the day, when you add up the various expenses, if you get a student discount, which they don't limit, it's $300 to get the Sunday package. So you're saving 30% of the cost by all these trickeries. Right?
I'm saving 66% because the router you only have to buy once.
That's fair. Okay, fair point. The other limiting factor of NFL Sunday Ticket as well is you don't get any of the evening games. You don't get the national games. So you're losing Thursdays, you're losing Sunday night. So you're not getting all the games. And you're in your local blackouts as well. So you're not getting all the games.
You have local blackouts, and you have restrictions on how many you can stream simultaneously.
Yeah. So, just like we all have our different, wouldn't yuck anybody's yum. In my older age, I've found actually, it's funny, Keith teases me all the time about baseball being boring, and he's not wrong. I find games that aren't football games I'm not rooting for a team personally, to be tedious humdrum. So for me, the solution to all of this is now and has always been the NFL Red Zone, which is basically there are 2 main hosts who watch all the games, and they just cut to whoever's about to score and like the exciting parts of the game, and they cut out all the commercials and all the BS in between. And that I find to be, so I just have to VPN myself an NFL Red Zone stream because I won't pay for that either.
I mean, Red Zone's great. And I agree with you that games that I don't have a rooting interest in are not nearly as interesting, but that's where fantasy sports comes in.
Yeah, I have to say, Keith, and this is a different show to talk about. I think I've come to the point in my life where this might be my farewell to fantasy football this year. I just have no interest. I'm just not in. It's not even motivating me to be interested in the games. Maybe it's just because the NFC East sucked last night. I don't know. We'll see. Football just disappointed me yesterday, and the Phillies lost. Sports sucked yesterday.
This has really been an upper of the show so far.
I do want a couple of technical elements just because you brought them up, and it's a geek show. So I'm curious because you have a lot of people upscaled to 1080p or have got the 1080p feeds coming on out. But my understanding is YouTube finally, because they got the NFL Sunday Ticket, doubled their bit rate for the way that they changed their codec to VPN 9 or VP9 from AVC, something else they were using, I can't remember. Anyway, which the increased bit rate is the improvement in quality we're seeing. So if that's the case, then I hope more people buy your NFL tickets so that we can get those fringe benefits. Because if I have noticed images looking better on YouTube TV.
Yeah. I will say. Although interestingly, I don't watch it on YouTube. I watch it on the apps themselves.
Well, then maybe the local feeds are getting better too.
Usually have lower, or are higher bit rate than streaming.
And also, I don't love all the different streaming networks getting their piece too. Like you got your Paramount Plus who's streaming some games. You've got Amazon Prime on Thursday nights. And look, we get some good quality on those. Even though Amazon still, I hope this season, last season, their 5.1 sync was off by like 3 seconds. So it was just murderous to watch. I hope they fix that this year. But mostly because, and this speaks to you specifically, Keith, and this goes for YouTube TV, Hulu Live TV, anything but the direct network like antenna feeds, have anywhere between a 30-second to 90-second delay between the live event and when you see it on the screen. So with these phones about us, God forbid it's an exciting game, you have to... Even you text me like, "Are you live?" I was like, "Well, not really. I'm still basically 2 minutes behind."
I warn everybody.
Yeah,
I'm behind. So like, delay all texts.
Yeah, because it's
even though I'm watching it live.
Like my phone will ping me, "Oh, home run by the whatever Phillies," and I'm like, "Oh, well, 2 pitches to go. I guess I know now." So I've had to go in and turn off all those notifications.
Yeah, well, and the stat tracker for fantasy used to be like 2 minutes behind. Now it's about 20 seconds ahead.
Oh, boy.
Crazy.
We're nerds.
Anyway.
Nerds. Okay.
Nerds.
So that's football. I'm glad things are getting better. I thought we'd be in the future by now. I should be able to watch it on my VR headset. Why can't I? All kinds of stuff like that.
Why can't you, Mike? Why can't you?
Aside from the fact that my head is gigantic and it's never comfortable in a headset, but that's
your head's gigantic.
Yeah. Okay, so... Oh, hey.
Oh, we went away.
We sure did. I reorganized I reorganized the screen and I forgot how to do what I'm trying to do. Okay. I watched a show on HBO called Telemarketers. It is a three-part docu-series. It is directed by Adam Lowe, Sam Littman-Stern, and Robert Akey Aubrey. Aubrey wrote the music. Excuse me. Executive produced by a bunch of people. The cinematography is by Christopher Messina, Matt Palumbi, and Sam Littman-Stern. I think I covered the things I wanted to cover. So here's the gist of it. We all have been called by telemarketers. We all kind of know that. You'd think it's easy for us in a certain universe, the young folk or just people who could easily spot a telemarketer and hang up, right? It's pretty easy. Even us, if you engage them with more than 3 words, you get caught into some weird manipulative hard sell that's hard to like escape. So you know right away, you just got to hang up and block the call. But that's not we are not who they are preying on. They are preying on mostly elderly people close to death. I mean, it is crazy. What this documentary is, how it is different and why it is pretty interesting, I have to say, is it starts by highlighting these 2 guys. I'm going to be very spoiler-free here. These 2 guys who, in the early 90s, have a VHS recorder and are working at a call center in Jersey. And Keith, it is just full of the pits of humanity. Ex-cons, people nodding out, doing dope during the call centers. I mean, they would give anyone a job if you could. There was a guy literally juiced up with heroin, nodding off on heroin, making the calls and making sales, right? They get it down to like an absolute perfect script. Don't deviate from the script. They're leaning on old ladies. And, on some respects, it's just despicable. And in the other way, you're like, well, here are people who need a job. They're coming out of prison. They can't get, literally, America will not give them work, right? You can't get a job. So this is their only the outlet. So it's you quickly reframe. It's not the drug addicts and the people working at these call centers that you have a problem with. It's the people who are using them, manipulating them into a churn system.
Oh, yeah, the employee. It's not their fault.
To basically fuck old people. But even worse is that 99% of the call centers are raising money for FOPs, Fraternal Order of Polices, the police union. They're actually being hired by the police unions under these contracts, right, that say explicitly, Dear Keith, Police Chief Keith, your FOP will get, your police department will get 5% of the gross marketing income we make for you, and we will keep 95% of it. But the out-of-pocket cost for you to raise money for your police department will be zero. So to Keith,
what do they have to lose?
It's free money, right?
Yeah.
And when eventually they get caught, because what they end up doing eventually is, see, there's laws that say you have to disclose if the caller asks that you are a fundraiser, you are soliciting. But eventually what they do is they start naming their marketing companies such and such blah, 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 blah police and just fake it as if they're the police. All this shit goes down. So
yeah.
That's part of this docuseries is like just exposing exactly what this scam is, and it's despicable.
Yeah. But what do you know? They're scummy people.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine.
But where it is different and is kind of really interesting is as a character study, because what happens is the dude who is just like videotaping all this nonsense because he's a teenager who's just like ridiculous ends up 20 years later having all of this footage of like basically active criming happening.
Yeah.
So he goes out to find some of the dudes he used to work with, namely this guy you see in this kind of icon here, who was the guy juiced up on heroin, basically ODing and making sales. And he goes to visit him. They strike up a friendship and decide they're going to bring this thing down. They're going to make a documentary and bring down the system as like Michael Moore type, what do you call it, investigative journalists. What's funny is that it turns out they're both really bad at it. As you can, it's a skill, man. Like he's not a good interviewer. He's got like this weird charisma. They don't really know what the hell they're doing. And it then chronicles them over the next kind of 15 years, chasing down senators, chasing down head of FOPs, trying to just like make a dent in this. In a pretty losing battle because, believe it or not, Keith, the rich powers that be and the police and the politics of all of this is pretty insidious and set up.
Hard to imagine. What?
But that doesn't mean that people who were pretty much the bottom rung of what we think of as our society, our caste system, right? Trying to decide at any point they want to be good citizens and do something good. Whether or not or how they succeed is kind of inconsequential to the point that you always talk about some of your family members and their social justice crusades. And look, at the end of the day, what they achieved is, I think, secondary to the fact that they made a decision that as citizens, they were going to attempt to make a difference. And there's something to be commended about that. There's a heroism in that. And it doesn't matter if you're a heroin addict. There is another thing potentially that you can do with yourself. And this is a pretty great example of that. On that side of the spectrum, this succeeds. This documentary succeeds in many ways, docu-series, in many ways I didn't expect it to. And that is the joy of watching it.
And I'm assuming this is a documentary about their documentary, not their documentary.
It is kind of both, because it is clear
other people came in and shaped this.
It does feel that way. Because the documentarian, the cinematographer, is more skilled than the interviewer guy. I really don't want to say too much, but it's not a shit show to watch. HBO clearly did some magic on it.
Yeah.
But it is, and it's short. They're 45-minute episodes. It definitely is worth a watch. It's Telemarketers. It's on HBO.
No,
Keith,
I'll definitely check that out.
So that's kind of some stuff we've been googling about. So lastly, it's Monday. We got a week ahead of us. Crack your neck. We got to keep it positive. I know we started on a dour note with 9/11 and such, but let's discuss our weekly read.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's funny because we were both discussing before we got on air that we are judges for the Brooklyn Sci-Fi Film Festival.
Yes.
And so we are adjudicating all of the sci-fi films that went in for the festival. And so we're both behind.
Mm-hmm.
No shock there. But I've watched about half of these submissions, and I'm doing categories the comedy sci-fi short film and the student short film.
Well, I'm doing comedy sci-fi short too.
Yeah. And here's the thing. We met with the folks running it ahead of time, and they were like, okay, look, these are students, these people have limited budgets, so take that into consideration as you're judging. Well, my weekly rad is being stunned at how good these things are. These are independent, student films, comedy films. There's people who are either young trying to get into the business, or people working at a sort of an amateur level or trying to break in somehow. I can't believe how good a lot of these are, and the talent that is out there with filmmakers and writers and production. Like the production levels, it is crazy. I think about what I would have been capable to produce in college. Obviously, there's technical difficulties, but differences. But I'm delighted in how good these are. It's very, very cool. So there's so much. We're here in the middle of a strike. We're all shut down, and we should be. And we stand firmly behind the writers and actors in this. But it's really exciting to see there's a lot of talent in the pipeline coming up, and there's going to be some really interesting stuff that we're all going to get to enjoy once we're back up and running again. So it's been really fun and encouraging to see emerging talent come together and do really good work. So, and people you've never heard of, which is great in this world where we're seeing sort of the same thing from the same people over and over again. There's a lot of cool stuff in the pipeline.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying it too. It's cool to see explosions of creativity is really what I kind of would call it, because the studio system and the way movies and just commerce works, a lot of any risk taking or pure creativity gets sucked right out of a project because it has to be market tested and fit into these little categories and such. Whereas here, it's cool. You get to read a little blurb that like the submission notes, and you get to read about the directors and the creatives behind the project. And one I watched, I can't say much. We're not allowed to say much, but this one I watched is basically, and I don't know if you've seen this one yet. It's totally ambient, so it's an animation, and it is telling a story with no words. It's Japanese creators, and it is just it's like feels. It's just like the story being told is like just through the visuals, what they want to express to you emotionally through the visuals, which I thought was going to be like a little too weird, but no, man, it really just kind of blew me away. Not just what they can do, how they can animate this, as like
there was one of them. It might have been the same one. I emailed the executive directors and like, did they do this, or how do I judge it? Because are they capable of creating this? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like,
see what people can do with computer graphics now it's crazy. And then the other point was the thing I kind of my imposter syndrome kicked in, and I was like, yeah, like should you be judging? Like, should you be adjudicating these people?
Yeah, well,
and it quickly after watching one film, I realized, oh, I'm not adjudicating anything. I'm just enjoying and deciding what to elevate to, in any way. So I'm having it's awesome. You're right. It is really rad. It is really rad. Speaking of that imposter syndrome, Keith, we are often huge proponents on the show for mental health and for pursuing therapy, but I do realize, and even though there is teletherapy and Keith has extolled the virtues of such, it used to be when you would sort of remember when WebMD first came out and people were WebMDing themselves to have cancer, and it was kind of quickly realized you shouldn't internet diagnose yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I've come to find that isn't particularly as problematic when it comes to mental health, because I have to do a quick story. So when I was in elementary school and secondary school, I clearly had some learning challenges that went undiagnosed and basically went unnoticed by a lot of faculty and stuff. And I suffered through a lot of my adulthood thinking I was a certain way, lazy, unintelligent, challenged, when in reality I was challenged. But the difference between knowing you have a learning challenge and knowing what that learning challenge is, the difference are strategies and tools to help, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily medicine to make you better, which is how binary we used to think things work. So my point being, even though a lot of those learning challenges for myself have not been diagnosed by therapists or by psychologists, because I spend my time in therapy doing other things, talking about other things, but more down the psychoanalyst kind of route. I have found some YouTube channels simply by typing in the direct problems I have, right? I'm having problems studying. I have problems starting to read or starting certain things. And, oh, that's called executive dysfunction. Oh, that's called such and such. And then you find people like Dr. Tracy Marks, who has a YouTube channel that I'm going to put on the screen now because I watch a lot of her stuff and I want to I am a subscriber. She talks a lot about ADHD. She talks a lot about executive dysfunction, which I don't know if these are my specific diagnoses, but a lot of the symptoms of these problems I suffer from as well, or I deal with those challenges. And I've taken some strategies from Dr. Marks, such as, so one of the issues I've had for my whole life, Keith, is that unless I'm 100,000% specifically interested in a specific topic, I find it really hard to read about it or to spend time. Like if I have to study something, it's not that I don't want to do this. I just can't. I can't do it. I can't explain it. That's the problem, I guess, with a lot of it. But as Dr. Marks was like, hey, listen, you'd be surprised that a lot of times it's like neural passageways. And it might just be the fact that, and I can't listen to music, right? Because I'm distracted. She's like, so find music, because you need to keep you need to keep your brain occupied. Find music that is ambient, no lyrics, just like either spa music or maybe movie soundtracks or something, and play that and just give it a try. And guess what, Keith? I'm 40 years old. I've dealt with this I'm 42 years old. My whole life I've dealt with this. Guess what? I found myself reading over the past couple months, free and easy, able to study better. It unlocked something, and I was like, "Oh, it's a strategy I just didn't know." It's that simple.
I totally get it. It's with the way our brains work, especially these days, and these you just focusing on one single thing, just really difficult.
Yep, and some other things. I've taken a lot of strategies. That's just a really simple example, and so. I guess my point is, don't forget when it comes to mental health and whatnot, you've got more resources than just now I got to go to therapy, right? So there are a lot of people, and I guess this goes for, yes, there's let's keep it on task. YouTube, check it out. If nothing else, check out Dr. Tracy Marks. Check out some other things. Just start the process of getting yourself a little bit more figured out for yourself. That's all.
And always think in terms of and as opposed to or.
Yeah,
all of these things, everything works better together in conjunction with other things.
All right. I like it.
All right.
Well, we did it. As always, we'd like to thank our patrons. You can always check us out on patreon.com/KM, where I've been told I got to put more things on the audio feed. So I'm putting everything on the audio feed now. So get used to our dulcet tones. We'll be back next week, as always. That's not the right button, but it's worth it. Check out our other shows. We've got all kinds of Star Trek happening. Season 4, Deep Space Nine, toys, strange new show. We got 2 more, the musical episode this week. Lots of fun stuff. In the meantime, lots of cool things happening this week. Hope you have a great week. Don't let anybody yuck your yum. Keep on doing all the things you find fun. Until we talk to you next week, keep on geeking on.